We're going to cover off on the philosophy of money, the ideas of virtue, value, and market order. And while many people have thought about the primary thinkers, including Rand or Hayek, etc., when it comes to the economy, I'm going to even extend this out to others as we start this. We'll go into Niccolo Machiavelli included. So the title that I'll give for this lecture is Money is the Instrument of Liberty, and we're going to go through it as a rational and realist perspective. I much prefer the sort of Chicago political school of like more hawkish rational thinking. I'm not terribly liberal in the modern sense, but the older sense. So let's really go into examining the nature of money through a philosophical lens, where we integrate the concept of realist power dynamics, Machiavelli, rational self-interest, Rand, and spontaneous order, Hayek. And I'm going to try and combine those in this lesson. So this lesson thus will clarify money's role as a tool in human freedom, coordination, and economic virtue, hoping to dispel the myths of collectivist ideas, collectivist myths, and those concepts that treat money as a mere social construct. So let's start at that point. So the nature of money, the problem of control. I haven't had a chance to upload the papers that I'll put together for this, but I will during the week. Everything in my life is a little bit slower after sort of meeting a bit of metal. But what we're going to do is, first of all, assert that money is civilization's lifeblood. That's the comment I'm going to make to you. Money is not an arbitrary creation, nor is it simply a medium of exchange. It is the foundation of human civilization, a system that allows individuals to coordinate their efforts, store value, and allocate resources efficiently. The free use of money, uncorrupted by external control, enables productivity, trade, and innovation. That world without money is not a utopia. It's a world reduced to subsistence, barter, and the arbitrary rule of force. And barter is not something good. So to frame the problem, why is money always under attack? We see this all the time. People misrepresent the biblical quotes. They say that money is evil, but it's not. If money is evil, then humanity is evil. And you might want to argue that too, but I don't believe that. So if money is fundamental to freedom and prosperity, why do we historically record a relentless effort by rulers, central planners, and ideologues to control, manipulate, or destroy it? If we consider the great monetary collapses in history, the Roman inflationary debasement, where the silver was basically debased and the coins became less and less worth money, Weimar Germany's hyperinflation, Venezuela, its economic collapse, and many others. Each case illustrates that the destruction of money is not accidental, but a strategic government action, an effort by rulers to seize power at the expense of individual sovereignty. Inflation doesn't just change how money is sort of produced, it actually moves money around. Those with certain types of capital become wealthier at the expense of others. Quite often, the middle class suffer more even than the poor who don't have money. So the three perspectives we're going to go into are Machiavelli. Money is the ultimate lever of power. Those who control it dictate the fate of states. Rand. Money is not just a medium of trade, but the symbol of man's rational, productive virtue. And Hayek. Money is not a creation of the state, but a product of spontaneous order, and any attempt to center it, plan it, leads to disaster. So the thesis I will basically put together for you in my philosophy of money is the instrument of rational order. The philosophy of money, to me, is not merely an economic question. It is the battle over human freedom. Machiavelli shows us that the rulers who debase money debase men. Rand reminds us that money is the badge of honor for the productive individual. And Hayek demonstrates that true economic coordination comes not by decree, but voluntary trade. And that's an important word there, voluntary. This lesson, in this, will cover and dismantle the illusions surrounding money. It will clarify its role as a tool of virtue, a foundation of security, and really the highest force of liberty. So the political reality of money, we'll start with Machiavelli. Money is the lever of power. Machiavelli understood that the control of money is the ultimate form of power. A state that cannot control its money is at the mercy of others. If it cannot control its currency, it is the mercy of those who can control it. This is why the greatest wars in history have been fought not just over land, but monetary sovereignty. Who gets to decide the value of wealth itself? The ruler who fails to secure financial stability invites rebellion and destruction. So if we look into the Roman Empire, its debasement of the denarius, a company name I used to have, a silver coin that was used commonly, far more than gold. A clear lesson is that the dangers of monetary corruption undermine society. So when emperors found it easier to inflate the currency rather than tax their people in a sustainable manner, they triggered an unstoppable cycle of economic decline. The soldiers demanded higher wages, the people saw their savings evaporate, and the inflation hollowed out the empire's economic foundations. Those with capital, such as land, gained. Those who had debts had more problems, etc. Farmers, for instance, who would borrow then to get money and pay it, would not always be able to earn enough to continue farming. So a state that loses monetary discipline loses the ability to govern itself. So from Machiavelli, we have the ruler's virtue. Why monetary stability is the test of leadership. For Machiavelli, a successful ruler exhibits virtue, a blend of strength, pragmatism, and foresight. For those who read Terry Pratchett, then you would see the patriarch of the city, basically, as someone who does that. Someone ultra rational, the ruler who keeps his currency stable, ensuring social order. The ruler who inflates and debases it creates chaos, breeds mistrust, and invites insurrection. So, for those who've read about it, John Law, an Englishman, went over to France and introduced paper money as an experiment in 1720. In 1720, that led to hyperinflation and collapse. The government wasn't able to support it, and eventually we saw the collapse of the French monarchy. Weimar Germany in the 1920s, the loss of confidence in money led to Hitler's rise, and Venezuela, printing money to help the people, destroyed the economy. So we have a clear lesson here. Monetary integrity is not a luxury, it's a foundation of political stability. A ruler who succumbs to the temptation of easy money is not a leader, but I would say a coward. So the illusion of stability without money is something that we would say utopians claim that we don't need money. The Marxists of the world, the others, they will argue that we can actually do this without money. The communist ideal is that we can function somehow without money. But without money, there's only brute force. So we see the fate of societies that have abandoned sound money, from Maoist China and the rationing of the Soviet system and the collapse of each of these systems. The lesson is undeniable. Destroying money destroys order. So I would take Machiavelli's perspective here and say that monetary power is as essential as military power, if not more so. A leader who controls money wisely maintains order. A fool who debases it invites ruin. Money must be defended just as a state must be defended. And just as we need a police force, we need to actually manage the money in a way that doesn't favor individuals and doesn't play with what we have. So money at the measure of man's virtue, Ayn Rand. Money is a moral instrument in this case. Rand obliterates the idea that money is the root of all evil. In Atlas Shrugged, she declares, money is the root of all good. Why would she say this? Because money is the symbol of production. It's not stolen, it's not given, not decreed, but earned. While it can be stolen, while it can be anything else, wealth must first be produced to be stolen. So a man who acquires wealth honestly has done so by producing something of value. The man who seeks to destroy money sees it through force. That's the true villain in this story. The producer versus the parasite is one of the key aspects of Randian philosophy. Rand divides the world thus into two types of men, producers and parasites. In this, the producer is the man who creates, builds, innovates, and thus is rewarded with wealth. The parasite is the man who seeks to confiscate, redistribute, or debase wealth to serve his unearned desires. Any society that punishes the producers while rewarding the parasites will end in destruction. That's why we see excess inflation, taxation, and fiat currency debasement, not just as economic errors, but as moral crimes. They take from those who create and give to those who demand without producing. So fiat currency enables this. The moral failure of modern money is argued by Rand to be needing to be backed by something real, whether it's gold, effort, production, etc. It needs to be something tangible. The moment we see government detaching money from value and printing wealth by degree, then we've engaged in legalized theft. So when Rome debased its currency, it collapsed. When the US abandoned the gold standard, inflation eroded savings. When Venezuela printed money endlessly, its economy fell away. A free society demands sound money. So a system where no bureaucrat can steal wealth by simply printing more of it is one that Rand would say, let the looters print all the paper they want. Reality will not yield to their whims. In this, the ultimate lesson on who controls money is that person who controls money controls your life. To control a man's money is to control his future in the Randian idea. To confiscate his wealth is to confiscate his work, his choices, his liberty, his future, everything. So between Rand and Machiavelli, we see that Machiavelli teaches us money is the weapon of rulers, but Rand teaches us that money is the tool of the free man. If money is controlled by politicians, then wealth is a permit granted by the state. A free society requires economic sovereignty. So money is not an illusion. Money is the foundation of any just civilization. And a free man must demand sound money, just as he demands freedom from tyranny. A ruler who protects money protects his people. A ruler who destroys money destroys liberty itself. That's where we get onto the idea of market order. So next we start looking at probably the greatest architect of monetary sort of ideas and concepts, following Mises, Hayek. Virtue, value, and the market order come through spontaneous creation. Spontaneous order and the free evolution of money is really something that happens because people trade. Money evolves. It's not designed. When you set it, it will change and morph based on what people do in use. Machiavelli revealed that money is a weapon of rulers, as I said, and Rand taught that it's the mark of productive value. But Friedrich Hayek took that further. In this, he exposed the arrogance of those who think money can be engineered. To quote, money, like language, law, or custom, is not the product of central planning, but of human action. Hayek dismantles the myth that money owes its existence to the state. It does not emerge from a ruler's decree, nor does it require bureaucrats to manage it. Money is a discovery, not an invention. Money is something that evolves through its needs and use in market and trade. It arises as individuals seek the most efficient way to store and exchange value. Both of these being critical, whether that's gold, silver, shells, Bitcoin. Money is found, not designed. As people use it, build it, create on top of it, then why would Bitcoin have script? So that people can design. The realization here obliterates the fatal conceit of central bankers and socialist planners. The fatal conceit that Hayek would say is the heart of the problem from those who believe that they can control money better than the market itself. So what we have is that the socialist delusion of monetary control is really one that Hayek warns us that the moment a government monopolizes money, it does so not to serve people, but to serve itself. The argument is the same. We hear this all the time. These quotes are ones that any politician could have told you. We must stabilize the economy. We must print money for the common good. We must control interest rates to prevent market chaos. In this, every single justification for monetary intervention is a lie. What happens when governments can control money? They print more of it. They inflate savings away. They manipulate markets. They favor insiders and friends over the others, and that creates a form of corruption. And when inflation destroys purchasing power, they blame the capitalists, the speculators, the businessmen, never the central banks that created the problem. And this is the ultimate Machiavellian deception. The state steals through inflation, then pretends to be the savior of the very people it robs. So Hayek's solution is denationalizing money. If a government can always debase money, then why let them control it at all? Hayek proposed something incredibly radical at the time, and something that, if Bitcoin is used globally in the way that it should be, could actually solve three problems: a competitive market and currency, a way to let people compete like any other good, and the end of the state's monopoly on money. So the problem is, why do we trust a central bank to stabilize money any more than we trust a central planner to stabilize the production of shoes or wheat? Markets produce better goods than state-run economies. They also produce better money. So the only way, and I'll quote again, the only way to prevent the abuse of money is to take it out of the hands of the government. Hayek, in this argument, directly challenged fiat money regimes and denominated, well, changing the way that we have money since the fall of the gold standard or gold exchange standard in 71, when Nixon and others abandoned gold standard, which wasn't really a gold standard, gold exchange standard, but also predicted the rise of decentralized alternatives. Bitcoin, etc., really enables that. As long as we don't give it over to EFTs, don't let it be controlled centrally in this way, and allow people to use it for exchange at low values. How they will create it into something else. So that's Rand's moral argument for money integrity, monetary integrity. It's taken to a logical economic conclusion in Hayek, this. So money as the cornerstone of liberty is really the test of civilization. The treatment in the society of money reveals its attitude towards freedom, productivity, and justice. Going back to Machiavelli, remember, money is a weapon of power. Rand, we see that money is the badge of moral virtue, and Hayek, we see that money must be free to evolve. When put together, we see the greatest lie of our time, that money should be controlled by the state. Nothing has been more destructive to liberty than this illusion. So the call to action that we should actually try and embrace is the future of money. If money is the instrument of liberty, we must demand monetary freedom. We must find ways of using alternatives. And if we have something like Bitcoin where the fees are low and it can be easily implemented, then this can occur. If inflation is legalized theft, then we must reject the parasites who print wealth into existence and tell us that any deflationary money will destroy the economy. And if spontaneous order produces the best money, we must support systems that remove the state from monetary power. We must remove that control and let it be back in the hands of a market and the people. So this is not an abstract debate. It's the defining battle of our age. The control of money is the control of life itself. The free man must demand free money or not be free at all, not have liberty. So the choice is clear: honest money or manipulated money, prosperity or theft, wealth or loss, freedom or servitude. And I don't think history will be kind to those who choose servitude. So if we cover this in detail, then what we need to start thinking about is where that really goes. So if we're going to now look at the battle over, we have to consider that the war on money is itself the war on freedom. And despite what people may say, those in government don't really want freedom. They don't want that because that is chaotic. It's not controlled. You can't plan. I mean, it's just like saying we can't plan innovation. Of course we can't plan innovation because planned innovation is stifled. It's iterations of things we've already had. It isn't chaotic. It isn't inventing something new that changes the entire world order. So the modern world has embraced that deception, the one that I mentioned, that money is merely being a tool of policy that governments must manage the economy with, and that inflation is a normal part of life. This deception, as I said, isn't new. It's the same deceit from Rome to Weimar Germany and what we're seeing in the West unraveling our economy. The difference today is the scale is unprecedented in history. This is a war fought not with swords, but printing presses or digital computers and zeros and ones. Every inflationary policy that we create robs our future. Every devaluation punishes the prudent and rewards the reckless. And every government monopoly on centralized power eliminates competition. And the thing is, the George Soroses of the world don't care. They can move their money. They can switch between currencies. They can move into gold and off into pounds to British pounds to US dollars to euros at a whim. The people who can't are the ones who suffer. So these three thinkers give us one conclusion. Free money is the foundation of free men. So to fully grasp this nature of this war, we need to think about the three fundamental truths of money. Remembering, from Machiavelli, money is power. Those who control money dictate the state structure. The wise ruler secures financial integrity, the weak ruler inflates, and without stable money, chaos reigns and tyranny follows. Ayn Rand, money is virtue. Money is not just a medium, it's a measure of productivity and ability. Fiat money and fiat currency rewards parasites and punishes the creator. And inflation is not an accident, it's a moral crime against productivity. Hayek, combining all this, money is discovery, not a decree. It's how we find prices. So no central planner can outperform the spontaneous order of market. It's just too complex. The state's monopoly on money is coercion and isn't necessary. And the path to real stability is currency competition, not government control. So when looking at through this lens, we see that money isn't the creation of a state. Money is not a social contract, sorry, Rousseau, and money is not a tool of manipulation. Money, rather, is the foundation of economic order. It is with money that a society can be created freely, and a society that betrays sound money betrays itself. So, fiat money versus free money. Yes. So, what we're really going to now have to look at is why? Why would we see economic stability or not? So how many people do we have in our group here, Joel?
We have, listening here, we have 5, and on Twitter we have 39.
Let's break our little group here that we've got online, and I'm going to give a quick exercise. And I want you to pick half and half and have one group see if they can defend fiat currency, probably not the best sort of group of people for that, but with the argument of economic stability. Give me see if you can give me the arguments. Be honest in trying to do it. And the other will advocate for a free market of money, competing currencies, and the end of central banking. Now, okay, what I want each person and each group together to do when you choose them, answer whether inflation is truly necessary, or is it legalized theft or something else? Can governments be trusted to manage money, or will they manipulate it for power? Could we have a control to set these things? If competition approves every other good and service, why should money be different? And does the state-controlled money ultimately lead to tyranny? So let's ask the people in our little group here what they think of those.
In that case, I'm going to quickly split everyone. Everyone on Twitter, if you want to join in, do a thumbs up if you want to defend fiat as a reply to the Twitter space, and do a thumbs down if you want to go against fiat. Okay, and then you can post your questions in Twitter and post your arguments on the Zoom space. Brendan, I'm going to put you, and Jack, can you type at all? Are you going to be able to participate?
He can use the chat. Jack, if you want to use the chat function, I can read out for you.
Yeah, I'm good. I can now I can participate.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so Well, you're a bit of a strong candidate, so I want you to defend Fiat, and I want Brendan and Carlos to go against Fiat.
Okay.
Right, okay. Against Fiat.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a very it's a system that is stacked in the favor of the people who control the issuance of the money, isn't it? So if you're just an earner and a user of the currency, and there is more and more of that currency flowing into the market, then you're very quickly going to drown and be unable to participate um, in the market. You know, you won't be able to buy things. You'll just get pushed to the bottom very quickly. And it is very much against the people who do not have a strong asset base. So typically, if you have hard assets, when inflation goes up, the value of those assets will rise with inflation, and then it's more the cost of living, which is what goes up. And so when you are living hand to mouth, fiat can really make life difficult for you, especially when you are in a country with an irresponsible monetary policy, um, such as we have in so many places these days. So that would be my argument against fiat currency. There's no real basis for the value of it, apart from, or not real basis, but it is so easily manipulated, as to be sort of ephemeral. It's not hard.
But what
So,
about the argument that the central bank's going to control the monetary policy so that the issue is fair and known in advance?
but is that what they do? I mean, really, they are making these policies up by the seat of their pants most of the time, it feels like. And yes, they are meant to maintain that stability, but and it's not even something that happens quickly. It's something that happens over several years. Is that you see the effect of the policy from 3 or 4 years ago uh, becoming apparent, and that's what makes it so easy for that policy to be skewed. They can do things that appear harmless in the very near term, but which actually create great harm over the long term.
Well, if we have cycles and we acknowledge that those exist, then you need to have as many levers that a government can pull to pull themselves out of hard economic times, which usually after a deflationary collapse, it's pretty traditional or almost inevitable that a country will go into war. Wars cost money, so sure, money debasement is a form of taxation on the people. However, it is necessary to keep the people safe. So if you take away all the powers of taxation that a government can use, then you take away their power to protect the people.
Also, the value, I mean, having a currency that has stable value is something that is helpful for society or individuals in general because they have they have predictability in their actions. So um, adding a stable currency and interfering in the currency, that's something that can be positive for the currency in itself and for society as a whole.
I'm
Yeah.
going to I'm going to read out Shirley's question from well, not question, point from Twitter, which is in support of Jack. For fiat, it can be put in your pocket. You can give it to people without a third party. You can keep some to manage fluctuations. It is easy to understand. Items we buy have a cost that doesn't fluctuate very quickly. So, do we have arguments against that, Brendan, Carlos, and against what
I
Jack?
mean, it's certainly on that last point. prices that don't change quickly. There are very much situations where prices will change very quickly. If you look at hyperinflationary events such as what happened in Venezuela or Zimbabwe in the last couple of decades, where prices of things were literally, doubling in hours. And so it really shows that with fiat currency and poor policy and irresponsible governance, you can create a situation where basically everybody is priced out of buying the goods that they need, except for the people on the take being given the free money that is being relentlessly created.
Let me introduce a different idea. There's a number of years ago, the Irish Republic needed to change the value of its money due to mismanagement. And that was announced by the central bank that they would do this. And it happened in December. Now, the people in Ireland, of course, would have suffered higher prices and did. But one, it's both predictable and people can plan for it. And two, they will react in a way that the central banks don't acknowledge. In this example, there was a massive influx of people traveled from Ireland to Northern Ireland, UK effectively, and they bought beer and they bought all their Christmas products, and they did it just before the money changed. And they did it as the currency rates were devaluating in one to the other, and they captured that. So people will act in these ways, and money can change quite quickly. Prices can change quite quickly, even in society. You might see prices go up in a store, or something you're buying goes up. The introduction of tariffs that we're going to see around the world again for the first time in quite some time is going to change everything. It's going to skew the migration of where things go in a way that people won't understand, because if you then put tariffs on importing copper and aluminium, and even gold, you're going to change the flow of materials. I mean, even something like gold, people don't think about this one, but gold, depending on how it's stamped, will now either have a tariff or not in the US in the future, potentially. If you have a US or other certain allowed hallmarks, that gold won't have a tariff. Whereas if you have say a Chinese or even Singaporean hallmark, you're going to then have a 20% tariff. Think of the disparity between two bars of gold. They sell for a different price in the US than they do in Europe. Is that going to have an effect on money? Now, link that back to what you do with monetary policy, and you have different forms of fiat. Remember, you have bonds and treasury bonds, and you have that which goes out to the bankers and those with money first, and you have those it filters through to, those at the bottom of the barrel, those at different levels. So as we're looking at this, we have to think about, can government truly manage money? Not even that, can they be trusted to manage? Not that they'll manipulate it for power, but can they even start thinking about how to manage it for money? How would they understand what people are going to do as a reaction? Not just the first results, but to harp on old Terry Pratchett, long deceased now, the second and third and other sort of results. What happens after and after? I mean, it's to, again, think of the broken window fallacy and Bastiat. Yes, it sounds great. That person who broke the window is making work for the glazier, but the wealth of society overall has gone down. Do we really care about how much money we have or how much wealth we have? So when we're doing this, we need to think about these concepts. So in thinking about this, do you think now that if we have open money, that's going to change how money works? And the two groups, one side for or against. If we have something like Bitcoin that is truly instant, truly open, able to be used, stored, and done as cash anywhere, do you think that's going to radically change how central banks are able to manage the economy.
Yes, because you currently have all of these places where the money washes around in between hands, where so if I pay someone with a credit card, it takes several days for that money to end up in their account, and in that interim period, it's being used in other activities, and where a money can now be made peer to peer, and those third party hands can be taken out of the picture, then we can see. I'm sure there will be knock on effects from that money no longer being available for naked speculation.
Yeah, and you also take away power from the central banks and the government, and you give it back to the people.
Yes, even if they are doing other things, the value of even the gold exchange standard, not that it was truly a gold standard, was that the limits were imposed on how much money was creatable. So that's really what the problem was. A government couldn't create money beyond a certain amount before it had to stop. It couldn't do what Johnson wanted to do in America, which is guns and butter. You had to make a choice. So by going off the gold standard, you could basically go, oh, great, now we can have guns and butter. And then we have stagflation. Oops, didn't think about that one. But Mr. Keynes said it doesn't happen. Mr. Keynes said you get one or the other, you can't have both. So unfortunately, well, we discover that just because an economist has said that it won't happen doesn't mean it won't happen. Now, so when we're looking at money, then if we have a way of openly exchanging, people are going to, and they're going to find a way of transferring it around the world, and they're going to find a way of using it instantly. And the benefit, of course, with Bitcoin is you know what the supply is. The real use case at the beginning was it was instantaneous or practically and global, and you didn't pay a lot of money. So fees of fractions of a cent around the world, that sounds like a good use case. No? Fees of EFTs or ETFs.
I'm going to throw in an argument for the pro-fiat side, and I mean I know my argument is wrong, but I'm going to throw it. In the form of macroeconomics, a government or a treasury wants to be able to manage their cities. And say if in the north of England, bakeries are doing badly, so they want to create inflationary cycles and manage the flow of money coming in and out, reduce loans and whatnot, or increase loans, is whichever may be the case. And they want to increase for bakeries as an example, or housing buildings, and which is always the case in England, which I'm sure they're not doing. They're doing something dodgy, but the case of improving housing and getting more housing built. But their argument that I would put forward in the pro-fiat side is that you can't do that with Bitcoin. You can't do macroeconomics and on a country. You need to have that control and to be able to inflate your money supply and deflate your money supply and so on.
Why can't you? Keynes, when he recommended his policy, did it on a gold standard. So the Keynesian idea was actually developed on gold. So if I can hoard gold and get rid of gold, etc., why can't I do the same for Bitcoin? So as I need to sort of cool the economy, I start saving up Bitcoin if I'm a government. As I want to release money, I start releasing it. The distinction is I have to have fiscal responsibility. Rather than in the good times, I print money and give it out, and then in the bad times, I print more money and give it out. I have to actually go through cycles where I plan and save. And that's the key aspect here. It requires people to save and be responsible, and the people to know what the hell's happening in the economy. Right now, very few people would even understand the amount of money going in or out of the government at any stage, how it's being spent, how it's being sort of sent around. The government has become a big, horrible monster that there's no way of actually understanding. And the framed problem I would actually put here is that governments always seek control over money. When they succeed, they rob people, they centralize power, and they destroy wealth. So, as I noted, Machiavelli reveals money as power, Rand shows that money is virtue, and Hayek says money must be free. But really, what we're getting at here is all of those things sound great, except they don't work. It's like it's a very rude tool. It's like giving a surgeon, instead of a scalpel, a blunt machete, and telling him to hack at the wound until he gets it open. And doing heart surgery on someone with a machete is probably not going to be terribly good, but it's about the equivalent. And why I'm saying this is you're mentioning a whole lot of things like we want to have those bakers have more money. But if we inflate the money in the entire economy, how do we know that any money gets to them? Rather, what we could do is during good cycles, when the taxation is high and everything's booming, the government saves up money, which will probably slow the economy anyway, making the cycle. And then they can choose who they want to help. But then we also have another problem. How do they decide who to choose? The general population,
they will pick themselves.
Yeah, the general population, though, is not going to say a lot because they're going to be widely dispersed in ideas. But then we have lobbyists, and the lobbyists will always be concentrated. So why do we have the wheat group? Because the wheat group, who represent wheat farmers, have to protect the wheat industry. And how do they do it? By making themselves richer. And then they will go up against the next industry and the next industry. And that's the problem. Why choose the bakers in this area? Obviously, someone has a tie for something. Are they really, should they be there? And it may sound mean, and politicians won't sort of ever admit this, but sometimes we need to let things fail too. Sometimes it helps not to let things fail and to build industries like South Korea did, for instance, through some protection. But until they get to a certain size and they can, well, fail on their own. But the issue here is who chooses, who decides. And with your comment there, we have just really understood power. We've decided that this group is going to be helped. Why? Because they're going to maybe vote for us. If they don't vote for us, if they don't aid in our power gathering sort of government support, then we're not going to give them what they need. And this, of course, creates a form of corruption. So when you understand that part of money, you understand power. Those who control money control civilization. You're saying the bakers need money. Why do they need money? I mean, obviously those bakers are not doing well in this area. Maybe there's 100 bakers in a city of 1,000 people. It's probably no longer warranted. Maybe they should move somewhere else. And that can be a hard thing. I've moved many times in my life. You do it, you don't do it, it's a choice. So, but having it as a technical policy, we're really going back about who owns your labor, who controls it, who controls your wealth and thus your future. So a free man demands free money. A slave accepts fiat.
To put an example on what Craig's saying, in the financial crisis, we had the United States government print an unprecedented amount of money and programs to save banks, especially large banks. We all are familiar with the too big to fail, but there's also a story of interactive brokers run by Thomas Petterfee, which is basically now, it's not top 5 world, but probably top dozen currently. And this is, a good 15 years after the financial crisis. And this is a guy that during the financial crisis took on less risk, saw that people were that banks were taking on too much risk, and he consolidated and made sure that he was going to survive. So his reward for this brilliant decision before the crisis hit was the opposite. So the government printed money too big to fail. They saved the top five banks, the Goldman Sachs, the JP Morgans of the world, et cetera, et cetera. And those are his competitors. And so his reward for being a proper steward of his company and his capital was to have his competitors re-emboldened to take on even more risk and pour more gasoline on the fire. And now I think we're in a worse situation banking wise than we've ever been, with probably a bubble. Now we have banks getting into cryptocurrencies and all kinds of crazy schemes and Trump coins and Hawk Tua, and things look worse now than they ever did. And Petterfeet at Interactive Brokers, to use him as sort of the bank that should be number one right now after the other ones were allowed to go bankrupt, he's the steward, the capable steward, who's had the power, and I mean power in a good way, to invest and reinvigorate the economy. He's had it taken away. So by government interference, as Craig has said, you've given power to kind of cronies who are maybe donating to your campaign funds, and they're not the right people. They were the ones that got you into trouble in the first place. So why would you want to give them the power to get you out of the bad situation?
So those with money don't suffer. As an example, if you trade between different currencies, say pound and US dollar, and you're worried about, well, what the government does, and you're wealthy, you can set up hedge contracts, futures contracts, etc. And I can basically have a contract set up for even a CFD or something like this, where if I have 100,000 pounds, I buy a hedge against futures value of US dollars, and I'm safe. But the average person can't do this. So we end up with something that takes money from the productive parts of society, those who are coming and forming new industries, those who are starting new companies, those who need money most. And while the idea in government is we want to protect the cash cow of the companies that are giving us tax, well, just remember that you do that too long and those cows die and you end up with nothing. So what we need to think about is, like, Rand argues that money is a moral instrument. And I'll say that goes both ways. Well, Rand said the money rewards ability and punishes incompetence. I'll actually say it can also go the other way. Good money, sound money, is a good, virtuous form, a moral form of money. But if we have poor money, money that is being debased, it's still moral. But it then punishes ability and, well, rewards incompetence. And that in itself is still moral. But morality isn't always good. Sometimes it's also the other. So as we finish up for today, I want you to think about this first part, and later in the week I'll load the paper up for you to read. But the idea here is, it's not just Hayek, it's not just Rand, but think even then of integrating the concepts of old Machiavelli, because it isn't the ideal of money. You've got to remember, whenever you do this, to take the other side. It's not just money creating things, but it's also money as the lever of power. And as Machiavelli understood, the control of money is the ultimate form of power. And a state that cannot control its currency is at the mercy of anyone who can. If we remember in Britain, George Soros, when he shorted the pound, when he made his couple $1 billion in a day, he also collapsed industries and banks and other things. And in doing that, he made himself a lot of money. But he did that because the government allowed manipulation. If they had money that was valued correctly and soundly, then that would never have occurred. So that's what I want to have you think about today.
I have a couple of questions from Twitter.
Certainly.
Arjun, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Okay, he's asking, what is Craig's perspective on usury, and if money
Usury.
yeah, usury.
Usury.
And if money should be free from control, how do we work with those who may like to take advantage of their position?
Usury, of course, is people earning excess interest. But really, what is that? Now, if people are stupid, there will be people who've taken advantage of. But that's not because of usury or anything else. That's because of people being stupid and ignorant to do with their money. And having better education so that people don't get into these problems would suit better. Stopping interest won't stop people earning money. They find ways around it. Islamic finance still effectively has the same interest rates as the West. They have their own instruments to do exactly the same thing and then go, but it's halal. So, yeah, I mean, you can argue all you want that whether that's right or wrong, but this is how it will work. And where Smith and others went wrong is the time and risk value of money. So money has value in time, and that really is going to be interest. I will value something now more than I will a year from now. And I'll certainly value something I have now more than I will 100 years from now. And saying that in 100 years' time, it'll be worth whatever. If you start thinking about it, the very ability to use something, our life, devalues money over time, because if we have it sitting there, we have less time to use it, less opportunity, and that opportunity cost will be evaded. So as it erodes on us, we need to think that, well, someone else is giving us an opportunity to do something now. And what are we doing with it? And that's the question. If you're taking money and it's at a high interest rate, but you're making more, then that's a good investment. If you are doing something where you need money and it will have a bigger return in the long run, that's a good investment. On the other hand, if you're taking a high risk and gambling, you might or might not lose, might or might not win, and you might lose, and that could be stupid, or even worse. And the problem comes not because of the people usurers or whatever else, but for those who take out second loans, mortgages, credit card debt to go on a holiday. And there are plenty of people who take out 50 grand on a credit card and blow a whole lot of money and buy a car and a holiday, and then find that they have a long time to pay it off. But that's not the problem of the person issuing. That's the problem of the person doing. And sitting there going, oh, we need to protect everyone who's stupid. Well, we'd be doing nothing but protecting people who are stupid if we did that, like it or not. And the more we protect people who are stupid, the more stupid people we get.
Absolutely.
The more we incentivize stupidity.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have another one.
So let me give you an example of, so a little while ago, I traveled through China. And one of the things you get in some areas where they want to have tourism and things like that along the coast is that they are incentivizing people to build resorts and houses and things like this. And they do that by giving you money for marketing in the first year, money for setting up the place, all this sort of stuff. And the problem is, after the first year, it's no longer economical. But the incentives are enough. You build the place, run it for a year, and then let it fall apart. Now, does that make sense? I mean, you end up destroying the industry because you end up with all these abandoned places and people don't want to go there anymore. So you have to think through incentives, not just at the first, but the later sort of stages.
Well, it's like the story of the cobras in Calcutta or somewhere in India. The British there were too many cobras in town, and so they said, "Oh, well, we'll put a bounty on cobras." And so people started breeding cobras and handing them in for the bounty. And then the British found out that they were breeding the cobras, and so they said, "All right, no more bounty." And so all these people who'd bred these thousands of cobras just let them go in the streets. And so not only did it cost them a whole heap of money, they ended up with even more cobras in the streets than they had before. So that's that
Exactly.
second and third order outcomes.
Yep. All
Greg,
right.
I have a question, real quick.
Certainly.
The history of, say, like metallic money, there's not a lot of instances of uh, money that didn't have government control of the mint or the debasement, as you mentioned, in Rome and all these things. If you consider something like Bitcoin, where it's not really managed by governments, obviously we can have central bank digital currencies on Bitcoin, so that's understood. But there's a dynamic there that seems kind of new, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know of any. I'm sure there's monies that were not controlled by government for a little while, but I would think that those periods were rather short, and then eventually the government comes in and says, "No, no, no, we're going to have $1 is going to equal 100 satoshis, and that's the way it's going to be, and you're going to use our money, and you're not allowed to convert back into Bitcoin." Like, how would you, how do you envision kind of the future of a digital coin like Bitcoin, that does have like backing like silver in sort of its informational value, but also has this government dynamic where they're going to want to take control somehow.
Well, they want to, but this is where global matters. What we need to make sure is that we have a system that is fast and cheap and easy to use globally. Now, once that happens, then we're competing. The rich, I mean, I'm fine. I mean, it's Bitcoin's not really there to help people like me. I can switch my money from renminbi to Russian currency to US dollars like that, and I can take a ruble and have it transferred into US dollars, then back into renminbi, into pounds, and that's within a minute. And it won't cost me much money at all. The wonders of being wealthy. So I can choose to pay people in whatever the hell I want. And I can negotiate different things when I'm buying more expensive stuff. I can pay off my Amex card and whatever the hell I want. The problem is the rich have this opportunity already. Government only stops it from the poor. But Bitcoin opens up the opportunity with the poor, not as BTC where you have to pay $50 a transaction sometimes, but where it's instant and nearly free. Not free, but nearly free. That's going to change things. When you can then start saying, I'm going to move this between whatever I want really quickly, then governments can say all they want, what they want to do, but it'll fall apart. They will either embrace it, and then they might do something like having some stupid little government stamped version of Bitcoin, so that they can say Bitcoin in America is stamped by, I don't know, Trump and Co. or something. I don't know, whatever. Make sure that it's honest Bitcoin.
Every time I hear someone argue for the poor, I just think of that skit in History of the World, Mel Brooks, and he has the Roman Senate, "Fuck the poor." They all say it in unison.
Yep, fairly much. Okay, and well, at this, I'm going to let you guys go and catch you next time. I'll send Joel a paper later this week that he can distribute.
Yeah,
and I'll also pop it up on Slack.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Craig. Thank you to us on Twitter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Catch you later. Bye.
See ya.
Right, and for everyone else, there's a couple of questions on Twitter, which we can address. We can continue going for another 10-15 minutes if everyone would like to. Brendan? Or
Yeah, I can hang around for a few more minutes.
yeah, I'm gonna to head off soon as well. So there's just a couple of questions just to bring up to the class to give you the opportunity to answer. From Twitter, we have it's more of a comment than a question from Shirley. Still trying to defend Fiat. My concern is that with no central control and it is in the hands of the people, there may be a free for all for those who have ill intent. The bad people will always try and find ways to manipulate the more trusting. So that's defending Fiat.
I don't think that having Fiat is going to stop that at all. Fiat just makes another avenue for the people who are willing to exert control over other people to do so. If you have a money system where there is no ability for anyone to debase, then you simply take that away as a tool for the manipulators. So that would be my rebuttal.
Any other words
Yeah.
on that?
Also, I think the fluctuation of money's price, for money to have a price has to be measured against something else. So in Bitcoin, we would measure against the fiat prices of the various currencies. But even if we didn't have fiat and Bitcoin was the money of the world, we would still measure Bitcoin's price based on relative to other goods, houses, cars, oil, etc. And I think people are very worried about the stability of money in terms of its purchasing power. But I think the fluctuation of money's purchasing power is a feature, not a bug, to use a coder expression. And the reason is because if you have a deflationary crash, a traditional depression, as economists would write about it, prior to our modern depressions, which seem to be strange, inflationary, hyperinflationary things. But a classic depression is prices go down. Like nobody can sell their cars and their houses, and so the prices go down. People go bankrupt. Those who are over levered are unable. They've overextended their businesses. They were over optimistic, and now they're consolidating. And when you consolidate all that debt, money becomes actually more valuable. The purchasing power goes up, and that's a self-correcting system. With if the people who are holding money rather than goods that are overpriced are rewarded by having everything be lower priced, well, then they're going to be more incentive to buy the bankrupt businesses and bail them out themselves rather than having the government do it. And they're going to likely do it in a much smarter, more sensible way because, typically private citizens are better at charity than the government. Private citizens are better at delivery and logistics than the government. Private citizens are almost better at everything than the government, other than maybe the military and the things that the constitutions of most of the first world nations provide that the government should do. So I would argue that you actually want your money to fluctuate, and the reverse is also true. So money becomes less valuable when prices are going up, and that actually also helps. So it helps the juicing of the economy, so that capital can flow and things can be built that weren't built before, and things can improve. So it works both ways, and I think to think that fiat is some sort of stable coin is high folly, because fiat is actually quite volatile. It's unidirectionally volatile, and it will eventually fail, and that's the worst kind of volatility you can have.
I have another question for the class. I like this question. In the game, this is from Nathan, if I pronounce your name correctly. In the game Conquest of the Empire, inflation is sometimes used by one Roman general to win a war against a competing Roman general. Is this a feasible case for creating inflation to go to war with another country and to crush them or win?
I think
Absolutely.
yeah, but it is also I mean, if you do not use inflation, you can always resort to other types of funding ways to fund your war. So if the currency completely collapsed, they can always resort to asking for more taxes, to asking for more sovereign debt abroad or somewhere else, or start selling their gold. So there are always ways in which the government can fund their wars if at the end they cannot have their currency to back it up.
Anyone else to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree. And not only that, I would say it's a good thing that, if you look at a lot of historical English wars, the king usually has to go to his court, as they call it. But his court is really just, rich farmers and businessmen in London and all these other very well-off people, and basically ask their permission to go to war. And if it was a frivolous war, the king was just mad at his cousin in Paris because, people in Normandy were up to something or whatever, and it didn't make any sense, then nobody's going to support that. And the king would usually be cut off from funding, and he wouldn't be able to go down and, initiate his war. But if obviously something like World War II is going to happen in the king times, well, rather than printing up a bunch of fiat, and which then gives all the power to the person at the printing press, and who knows if that person is sane. If it had happened during the times of the king, and you go to Google and Facebook and all these people with billions of dollars and say, well, the alternative, if you don't start contributing some money to this war effort, whether it be via loans, bonds, or whatever, you're not going to have a Google and Facebook, and all this giant wealth that you've built is going to be in the hands of the Chinese, the Russians, whoever the enemy of the day is. And so I think that's a check and balance as well, that you actually want to have governments have to ask permission for things like wars, in addition to things like the checks and balances in the Constitution that force a president to ask Congress. Well, it's even better who trusts a lot of people in Congress? It's almost better if they have to ask the people for the permission to go into the war.
I'm going to add a few points to this question as well. There's two types of inflation, and both can be used in war in underhand ways or in open warfare, which is monetary supply inflation, printing of money. So say like North Korea sits down with its USD printer and just every day prints like 100 million USD dollars and floods the market with that. That's supply inflation. Or value inflation, where they are basically messing around with the supply of goods, so that the price of goods in the market go up. Supply inflation does end up leading to value inflation, but it's the case of whether you can actually print the dollars, reasonable forgery dollars, which does actually happen. If it's interesting to look at the total amount of suspected forgeries in the USD market. I point out the USD, but it does happen in all markets around the world. It's just that the USD is obviously the most heavily used and so the most heavily targeted. So yeah, supply inflation is a way for one country to attack another country. They don't even need to be at war. They could just be doing it underhandedly. And I'm going to bring up the point of Bitcoin is that if a fiat currency, a substitute is done on Bitcoin, a stable coin or whatever you want to call it, just a substitute, and then that completely nullifies this type of monetary supply inflation attack. And the monetary supply inflation has been going on since the Middle Ages, not always intentionally as a form of attack, but going back to the Roman Empire, when one of the reasons an argument says that the Roman Empire collapsed is because they started devaluing silver and gold heavily by mixing in other metals into the supply. So you'd get some, 99% pure gold. Once it's mixed in with the money lender's hands, the gold would be 50% pure and mixed with loads of other stuff. And this would increase the monetary supply, because then they were giving out twice as much as alleged gold, but obviously it was worth less. And anyway, that's another thing if people want to look into the supply inflation of the Roman Empire and what happened there. And it's continuously happened. Bitcoin has the means to put a complete end to this type of tactic. It doesn't stop value inflation, however, because that is to do with supply goods. It does go away towards helping to stop that, but I would argue that the worst scenario is for monetary supply inflation. And it's just a case of countries getting that into another country, which nowadays with banks and stuff, it's a lot easier to do that than it used to be. There is another question. I'm going to end with this last question for the class from Dragon. Why are people more interested these days in the barter trade over fiat? I don't know if it's true or not, but does the class have an opinion on that?
I think it's because of a lack of trust in fiat. I think people think that they can see that the fiat system is rotten, and they can see that barter is a means to get around it, to not participate. And yeah, I would say that that's why we're seeing more and more barter. People are finding that the system is not looking after them, and so they're choosing not to look after the system by simply not using it, by not participating in it, by not paying taxes through it. So I think that's why barter is coming back.
Any other opinions or thoughts on it?
Well, I actually haven't seen that much barter going on, at least around me, so I don't really have an opinion on that.
Okay, and with that, everyone, I will be bringing the class to an end with the last couple of messages. Craig I'll just mention this because some people were curious. Craig did have an injury a few weeks ago. That's why he's been silent on Twitter and such. He is recovering and doing well. So that's all good. And we are going to be doing the classes, philosophy of money classes once per month again. There will be papers coming out on Slack for people who are interested in, well, you will need to read it as class attendees because, so you can give proper feedback. These classes shall hopefully be live streamed like this on Twitter every month, if I do it correctly.